All right, inch a little closer to the flames. The light keeps the shadows at bay. But some stories like to creep in on the quiet air between the crackle of the logs. This one comes from not too far from here, from the rolling hills, where old sanatoriums lie crumbling like forgotten bones. It's about a place the locals call Dýchací Dom, the breathing house, and the four friends who thought it was just another abandoned building. You know the type. Urban explorers, they called themselves, armed with DSLRs, headlamps, and a reckless disregard for no trespassing signs. Their leader was Jakub, a former architecture student who saw beauty in decay. He was pragmatic, steady, the one who checked for asbestos and unstable floors. His girlfriend, Ava, was the crew's vlogger. She lived her life through a lens, curating their adventures for a small but dedicated online following. For her, a place wasn't real until it was captured, edited, and uploaded. Then there was Tomasz, the skeptic, and the muscle, a big, affable guy who came along for the thrill and the company. He'd laugh off ghost stories and explain away strange noises as wind or rats. His disbelief was a shield for the others. Finally, there was Lena, the quiet one, the historian. She was the one who dug up the stories behind the places they explored. She had asthma and carried an inhaler with her everywhere, a constant reminder of the fragility of her own breath. It was Lena who found the breathing house.
Listen to this.
She'd said a week before their trip, reading from a brittle, yellowed newspaper article on her laptop.
Sanatórium Volkov, opened in 1928 for the treatment of tuberculosis. The head physician, a Dr. Aladár Volkov, had unconventional theories.
Unconventional how?
Jakub asked, peering over her shoulder.
He believed the environment itself was key.
Lena explained, her eyes wide with fascination.
He thought he could cure the sick by controlling the very respiration of the building. He designed and built a massive steam-powered mechanical lung in the sub-basement. A series of intricate vents, like bronchioles in a lung, would circulate specially treated, ozonated air to every room. He claimed the house itself would breathe for his patients.
Ava shivered dramatically for her phone camera.
Ooh, creepy. The breathing house. I love it. Think of the B-roll.
It gets weirder.
Lena continued.
The sanatorium was shut down in the late 40s. The official report said it was due to funding cuts and advances in medicine. But the local folklore, it tells a different story. It says Volkov's machine worked too well. That it started changing. It didn't just circulate air. It started to inhale the pain, the fear, the dying breaths of the patients. The story goes that the house's breathing became corrupted. That it learned to mimic not just air, but life. And that Volkov was its first victim, found in his office, blue-faced and breathless, with not a mark on him.
Tomasz snorted.
Sounds like a boiler exploded and they needed a spookier story for the insurance. Let's do it. I haven't seen a good abandoned asylum in ages.
And so, it was decided. A week later, their car bounced down a forgotten, overgrown road in the Slovakian countryside. The sanatorium revealed itself slowly, a pale, colossal shape emerging from the mist-shrouded pines. It was a monument to sickness. 4 stories of stained concrete, its windows like vacant eyes. An unnerving symmetry defined its architecture, with 2 great wings branching out from a central block, like a diagram of human lungs. And running up the walls like iron veins was a complex web of vents and grills, all converging towards the building's hidden heart. The air was heavy and still. The moment they stepped out of the car, the noise of the modern world seemed to die, swallowed by a profound, listening silence.
Okay.
Eva whispered, her vlogging camera already rolling.
This place has atmosphere for days.
They found an entry through a collapsed wall in the kitchens, stepping from the living world into a dead one. The air inside was thick and cold, smelling of damp plaster, rust, and something else. A faint, antiseptic scent, like a ghost of old medicine. Dust motes danced in the beams of their headlamps like tiny spirits. The first few hours were a rush of discovery. They explored the patient wards, where skeletal bed frames lay in neat, rusting rows. They found the operating theater, its great overhead lamp, hanging like a cyclopean eye over a stained porcelain table. Lena was in her element, finding patient ledgers with faded ink, detailing treatments and slow declines. Jakob pointed out the strange architecture, the way every corner was rounded, every hallway wide, all designed to prevent the stagnation of air. And everywhere there were the vents, grills in the floors, in the ceilings, ornate brass covers on the walls. It was an intricate, all-encompassing circulatory system. Tomasz, ever the skeptic, tapped one with his boot.
You've got to hand it to the old quack.
He said, his voice echoing in the cavernous ward.
He really committed to the gimmick.
It was as they were exploring the children's wing that they first heard it. A faint, rhythmic sound. It was slow, deep, and impossibly soft.
Did you guys hear that?
Eva asked, lowering her camera. Tomasz paused.
Hear what? It's the wind, Ava. This place is probably a sieve.
No,
Lena whispered, her hand instinctively going to her chest.
that didn't sound like wind. It was regular.
It came again, seeming to emanate from the walls themselves, from the very air around them. It was the sound of a slow, slapping breath. They fell silent, straining to hear it over their own heartbeats. Then, as quickly as it had come, it faded, leaving only the dripping of water and the creak of the old building.
See? Nothing.
Tomasz declared, though his voice was a little less certain than before. They tried to shake it off, but the spell of the adventure was broken. A seed of unease had been planted. Every gust of wind in a broken window, every rustle of plaster, now sounded like the prelude to that soft, rhythmic breathing. Lena, in particular, was affected. Her own breathing felt louder in the silence, more labored. She took a puff from her inhaler, the hiss of the device startlingly loud in the dead quiet. As she did, she thought she heard a faint echo from a nearby vent. A tiny, metallic hiss, a perfect mimicry. She told herself it was her imagination. They found Dr. Volkov's office on the top floor. It was the most preserved room in the building, sealed from the worst of the decay. A heavy oak desk stood before a vast window overlooking the wilting grounds. On the desk, an open journal lay, its pages covered in a spidery, frantic script.
This is it.
Lena breathed, carefully turning the fragile pages. The final entries were a spiral into madness.
October 12th.
She read aloud, her voice trembling slightly.
The machine has learned a new rhythm. Last night, it replicated the shallow, panicked gasps of the boy in Ward C, Little Carol. It did so for an hour before he passed. It is not just circulating air, it is tasting it, cataloging it. October 19th. It has begun to anticipate. I feel a tightness in my chest, a shortness of breath, and moments later, I hear the machine's great bellows mimic my distress, pumping that same frantic rhythm through the walls. Does it feel my fear, or does it cause it? The line between the house and my body is blurring.
Eva had her camera focused on Lena's face, but her own was pale. Tomasz stood by the door, his arms crossed, his usual smirk gone. Lena turned to the final page. The handwriting was a jagged scroll.
November 3rd. It breathes my thoughts. It knows my memories. It whispered my mother's name in the static of the ozonator. It is a parasite that has taken this building as its host, and now it wants a body. I gave it a lung of iron and steam, and in return, it is stealing mine. I will not let it have me. I will sever the connection. I will hold my breath.
The entry ended there. A dark, ugly stain marred the rest of the page, as if the pen had been dropped and bled dry. A heavy silence descended on the office. Outside the window, the sun was beginning to set, painting the decaying wards in hues of orange and blood red.
Okay, that's it. I'm done.
Eva announced, her voice shaking.
This place is bad. We need to go.
Ava's right.
Jakubi said, his face grim.
Pack it up. We're leaving.
But the house had other plans. As they made their way back towards the ground floor, the breathing started again. This time it was louder, closer. It wasn't the slow, sleeping breath from before. It was a collection of breaths. A wet, ragged gasp from one vent. A long, weary sigh from another. A child's frightened, shallow panting from a grill in the floor. It was a chorus of suffering, a symphony of last breaths echoing through the iron lungs of the building. They broke into a run, their boots echoing on the grimy linoleum. The breathing followed them, swirling around them, a suffocating, invisible presence. Lena stumbled, clutching her chest, her own breath catching in a wheezing gasp.
I can't breathe.
She choked out, fumbling for her inhaler as she raised it to her lips. A voice whispered directly from the vent beside her head. It was her own voice, distorted and strained.
No use, no air left for you.
Lena screamed, scrambling away from the wall. They reached the main hall, a grand, two-story space with a shattered skylight. Their exit, the collapsed kitchen wall, was on the far side. But their path was blocked. The great heavy iron doors that sealed the main wards, doors they had passed through easily on their way in, were now shut.
They were open.
Tomasz yelled, throwing his shoulder against one. It didn't budge. He slammed his boot against it. The metal rang out like a funeral bell, but the door was immovable.
The air pressure.
Jakub realized, his face ashen.
It's the machine. It's creating a vacuum, sealing the doors.
The breathing was all around them now, a cacophony of dying gasps, and woven within it were new sounds, whispers. They weren't just random words. They were personal, tailored.
You should have checked that scaffolding, Jakub.
A voice hissed, mimicking a construction foreman from his past, from an accident he'd never spoken of.
It's your fault he fell.
Jakub staggered back, his face a mask of guilt.
They're all laughing at your video. Eva.
A girlish voice tittered from a high vent, sounding like a high school bully.
They think you're a joke. A try-hard.
Eva let out a sob, covering her ears. The house was inside their heads. It had inhaled their deepest fears and was now exhaling them as poison.
It's a trick.
Tomasz bellowed, his fear manifesting as rage.
It's just noise. We have to find another way out. The basement, the machine. If we can shut it down, we can stop this.
He was right. It was their only chance. Led by Jakub, they found the stairwell leading down into the sanatorium's guts. As the air grew colder, damper, and the chorus of breaths receded, replaced by a single, colossal rhythm. Thump hiss, thump hiss. It was the heartbeat of the house, the source, The sub-basement was a cavern of brick and sweating pipes. And in the center of it, dominating the space, was the lung. That was a Lovecraftian horror of engineering. A monstrous contraption of iron bellows the size of a small car, connected by a tangle of thick arterial pipes to a massive coal-fired boiler. Pistons drove great arms back and forth, causing the bellows to expand and contract with a mighty, groaning hiss. With every contraction, a foul, cold air gusted from its vents, smelling of rust and old sorrow. It was alive.
We have to stop it.
Jakob yelled over the noise.
The boiler! If we can kill the fire, we can stop the engine.
And Tomasz ran for the boiler, grabbing old shovels and trying to scoop the burning coals out of its furnace. But as they did, the machine seemed to notice them. The rhythm faltered, then sped up, the hissing growing frantic. Hiss, 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 hiss. A powerful blast of air erupted from a massive duct above their heads. But it wasn't just air. It was a thick cloud of black dust and spores, the accumulated filth of decades. The cloud didn't dissipate. It swirled, coalesced, and took a shape. It formed into the dark, wavering silhouette of a man, a featureless figure of pure dust and malice. The spore man lunged at Tomasz. He swung his shovel, and it passed right through the creature with a dry rustle, the shape momentarily scattering before instantly reforming. It enveloped him, a whirlwind of suffocating black dust. Tomasz choked, his eyes wide with terror, clawing at his own throat as the dust filled his mouth, his nose, his lungs. He fell to his knees, his body convulsing, and then was still. The dust cloud settled over him like a shroud, and then with a soft hiss, was sucked back into the main vent, leaving his body on the cold floor.
Tomasz!
Eva screamed, her camera falling from her limp fingers and shattering on the concrete. Another cloud of dust was already gathering, this one twisting itself into a smaller, more slender form.
Lena, run!
Jakob shouted, grabbing a heavy pipe wrench. He stood between the girls and the emerging horror.
Get out of here! Find another way!
Lena was frozen, her breath coming in ragged, useless gasps. Her inhaler had fallen from her grasp. The house was finally stealing her breath, for good, as the second spore figure solidified, taking on the vague shape of a nurse in an old-fashioned uniform. Lena looked past it, at the monstrous pulsing machine. She saw the main intake valve, the massive grill at the base of the bellows where the air was sucked in, and she remembered Volkov's last words, "I will hold my breath." With a sudden final clarity, she understood. She scrambled past the horrified Eva, not towards the exit, but towards the machine.
Lena, no!
Jakob cried. She ignored him. As the bellows drew back for its next massive inhalation, she threw her small body against the intake grill, pressing her face and chest against the cold, rusting iron. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the machine began to inhale. The suction was immense, a hurricane force vacuum. It pulled her tight against the grill. Her clothes and hair sucked against the metal, but she did not breathe. She held her breath, her face turning purple, her lungs burning. She was offering the machine a vacuum, a void. She was giving it the only thing it couldn't understand. Silence. The machine stuttered. The rhythmic thump hiss faltered. It was like a computer encountering a fatal error. It tried to inhale, but there was nothing to take. The spore nurse wavered, its form flickering. The engine groaned, a high-pitched shriek of tortured metal as its pistons fought against. The paradoxical physics of it all, with a final deafening bang, A massive piston snapped. The machine shuddered to a violent halt. The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, and beautiful. Lena's body slumped to the floor. Jakub and Eva stared, frozen in grief and shock. They had seconds, maybe a minute, before the house, in its death throes, tried something else. Jakub grabbed Eva's arm, pulling her from her trance.
Come on.
They ran, leaving their friends and their equipment behind. They scrambled up the stairs, finding the iron doors now slightly ajar, the pressure gone. They didn't look back. They burst out of the collapsed kitchen wall and into the clean, cold night air. They fell to the ground, gasping, crying, and breathing freely. They were the only two who made it out of the breathing house. They never spoke of Tomasz or Lena again. Not to the police, not to anyone. They just disappeared from their old lives. But the story doesn't quite end there. Jakub and Eva split up, of course. The shared horror was a wall, not a bond. But they took something with them, a little piece of the house. They say Eva, the vlogger, can't stand silence anymore. She lives in a city apartment with the TV on all the time, music always playing. Because in the quiet moments, she starts to hear it. A faint, rhythmic breathing from the heating vents. And sometimes, in the static between channels, she hears a whisper. They're all laughing at you, Eva. And Jakub moved to a small coastal town, thinking the constant rush of the ocean waves would drown out any memory. But on still nights, when the tide is low and the air is quiet, he feels a tightness in his chest, and he swears that if he listens closely enough, he can hear, carried on the sea breeze, the faintest sound, the sound of a great iron lung, slowly, patiently, starting to breathe again.